political democracy still in its adolescence, even in the Western world, richly deserves the adherence of civilized people. Nor are the trends toward economic security and social equality so evident in America since World War II altogether wicked. Nor do I deplore, as humanists sometimes do, the marvelous progress of modern science and techniques. If we are in consequence threatened by various forms of catastrophe, we are also offered enormous opportunities. In any event, there can be no return to idyllic times and places that never existed for the mass of men. There is a chance that mankind is only at the beginning of a long and most glorious career. Its history thus far, if it contains too many cruelties, too many stupidities, is surely fascinating. The American phase of it is, of course, in some ways unique, but it is now tightly interwoven with that of the race. Chapter 1. The Red Americans. At first thought, it is rather disconcerting to recall that the American of the fourth quarter of the 20th century is the product of ages of evolution. Surely he ought to be superior to what he is. But wait. Not long ago, man was scampering about in the trees with his anthropoid cousins. His descent to the ground on his ascent to intelligence and power is quite recent. The incomplete separation of man from other mammals is also biologically novel, and the American variety of Homo sapiens has been in existence for no more than a moment upon the cosmic clock. The human race is in its infancy. To be sure, it may never mature, because it is like a child with tremendously dangerous toys, because it is constantly convulsed by wars, because its progress may possibly be wretchedly interrupted by military and nuclear clash. However, although one may fear that man will suffer enormously from the use of the terrible weapons he's fashioned and will fashion, one may reasonably doubt that he will utterly destroy himself. Nor does it seem probable that he will soon be done to death by bacilli, viruses, insects, climactic change, or any malign combination thereof. It is likely that he will proceed, despite conceivably most severe reverses, in recognizable form, that he will become far more civilized than he now is, that he will ultimately look upon his forebears of this 20th century as primitive. The part played by American man in such a troubled advance of the race may be substantial, though small in the history of our planet. It is barely possible that our earthly breed will play a role in the history of our galaxy. In the history of our universe, one hardly dares to speculate. Changed and greatly improved man may endure as long as our galaxy, even as long as the existing shape of the universe, but he is by no means as old as the planet over which he holds uncertain and possibly temporary sway. The American variety of Homo sapiens is younger than other branches of the human species. Perhaps 18 billion years in the past, there was a vast explosion of the universe which resulted in the appearance of the galaxies, perhaps 100 in number, containing 100 billion stars, many of these having satellites. In our galaxy, observed in part in the sky as the Milky Way, there may be as many as 1 billion stars or suns. Our Earth appeared about 4 billion years ago as one of the satellites of our Sun. A creature that may be considered human, a super simian, has existed upon our globe about 100,000 years. The history of civilized man spans no more than a few thousand years. The history of the modern American, if it began with the arrival of Columbus in the Bahama Islands, covers less than 5 centuries. If it be restricted to the Anglo-American era, it is confined to fewer than 4 centuries. Should it be limited to the period since the declaration of American independence from Britain, it is continued for more than 2. By any reasonable count, he is a Johnny-come-lately, even upon this planet. There are those who believe that the human race was divinely and uniquely created, even that the American variety of it, being superior to others, was ordained to be such. If there be special creation upon this satellite, it would seem to apply to all living things, including plants and animals and half-alive viruses. The processes by which they developed were neither swift nor remarkably efficient. Arithmetic and logic declare that life in forms we cannot describe, some perhaps very much like Homo sapiens, must exist upon some of the myriads of satellites of stars in the universe. That conclusion is buttressed by the fact that most of the amino acids toward which most scientists point as the building blocks of life on Earth have been found on meteorites and are not confined to this planet. Was there, then, Is there creation throughout our galaxy, throughout the universe, similar to that which has been perceived upon Earth? And if it be so widespread, can it be Christianly or Buddhistly special? We do not have answers to such questions from science. Affirmative replies must come from faiths beyond our common understanding, faiths acceptable only to their votaries. A hypothesis that life in forms far more advanced than our own exists upon older planets in the universe, even in our galaxy, does not put a crushing strain upon either mathematics or reason. It is not known that life began earlier in the New World than in the Old. There is speculation that organic matter first appeared when lightning struck among amino acids in a tidal pool or lowland swamp, alternately that it developed from commotion on the floor of the oceans. Conceivably, there were several, even many such incidents before life was firmly established. It has been suggested that it came from space. In any event, it was at length permitted by geological change. Certainly it was widespread before the appearance of the continents in their present shapes, as the presence of similar animals and plants upon lands in the eastern and western hemispheres, separated by wide spaces in water, testify. The phrase New World is not used to indicate that there is a biologically more ancient Old World, but to signify a Western Hemisphere in which man was a late arrival, in which the European variety of civilization came even more tardily. There were horses, camels, sloths, mastodons, trees, shrubs, and doubtless flies and mosquitoes in the Americas long before humankind appeared on the Western continents. Indeed, many forms of life had come and gone, including the remarkable dinosaurs, whose relatively sudden disappearance is as difficult to explain as the survival of the small creatures from whom humankind evolved. At the time when man entered the New World, all of its plants and animals were fundamentally the same as those of other parts of the globe, but they were by no means identical. Strangely, man was the latecomer. Of what race, of what nation were the first men who gazed at the splendors of the Grand Canyon of the Colorado, who wandered along the sandy eastern shores of Lake Michigan, who peered into the muddy waters of the James River, who became lost in the bayous of Louisiana? Which Europeans anticipated their fellows in the discovery of the Western Hemisphere? Did not Africans, or at least Carthaginians, cross the Atlantic before any Europeans? Was Jamestown or Plymouth the first permanent settlement in that part of the world which became the American Republic? There are those who assert that the human race lived in the New World 70,000 years in the past. It is more likely that the first entrance was made by immigrants from Asia between 20 and 40,000 years ago. But if the existence of man in the Western Hemisphere proves to be so biologically brief, it is nevertheless both lengthy and extraordinary historically, and it must fascinate him so long as he retains power to remember and to record. All of that history cannot be related in these pages. They are devoted to the rise of civilization in those regions of the New World which came under the flag of the United States. Indeed, it is not possible to do full justice to every phase of that remarkable development in those areas, even though Canada, the Caribbean world, and Latin America south of the Rio Grande are almost ignored. We cannot say what the first Americans, the Indians, would have accomplished had their progress not been interrupted by the invasion of the Americas that began with the first voyage of Columbus in 1492. Obscurely entering the New World by way of Siberia and Alaska ages before anything that can be called civilization existed anywhere on the globe, they lived millennium after millennium in almost complete isolation from the rest of mankind. Asian in origin, they departed from the Orient before there was a China or a Japan. Nor was there a Babylonia, an Egypt, or a Greece until they had long been settled in all parts of the New World. In their new homes they remembered nothing about Asia. They knew not whence they came, and they learned little, if anything, about the progress of man elsewhere before the appearance of Columbus in the Bahama Islands. The ancestors of the Indians were undoubtedly hunting folk who merely straggled into Alaska from Siberia. The physical resemblance between the red men on the one hand and Asians and Eskimos on the other is obvious. They were and are more closely related in physique to the Mongolians than to other peoples. It is likely that a land bridge between Siberia and Alaska, long since vanished, facilitated their penetration into the New World. In any event, they gradually made their way southward and then eastward. They were favored by nature, for the glaciers had retreated and the last ice age had ended. being succeeded by a warm and dry period that gradually evolved into a cooler and wetter one.